So I'm doing a goulash today, but a traditional like Hungarian goulash is usually pretty heavy and you usually use like a beef chuck or something like that. And being that it's only summer out, I wanted to go a little bit lighter. They call it a butternut squash goulash. And typically, and it is traditionally, this one is a little bit of a lighter recipe, but instead of using ground beef, which is a little bit lighter than like a beef chuck or a cubed beef, I'm using a ground chicken. And I already started. The first thing I did is I put in my pot some red pepper, a bell pepper, some onion, and my chicken so that I could brown that. So I put that in. It is best to use a Dutch oven. In my original recipe that's still cooking, there's a Dutch oven. It's fine in a pot. It's going to work fine. Something about the Dutch oven just, I think, makes it like a little bit hardier, but totally fine. So that's what I have in my pot right now. My chicken is browned. And then the next thing we're going to do is add the rest of our ingredients to let it simmer. So I'm going to add some fresh tomatoes. You want it to be no salt added because we are adding some other flavorings in here. So if you can get one that has no salt, great. If not, it's fine. Some less salt later when we add it in. Then we have, again, a no salt added tomato sauce, canned tomato sauce. So we're going to add that in. And some people may say, why do we need both? We do because they're very different tastes and it allows for just different flavors to come through this goulash, different textures, and it's all really necessary. The next thing I'm going to do here is add my butternut squash. So we want to make sure that the butternut squash is on the smaller side when we cube it, just so that it takes a little bit shorter to cook, because if it's bigger or if some pieces are bigger than others, some pieces may not be as cooked, and we want to make sure everything's cooked through nicely and tender. So we're going to put in a butternut squash. And I know squash is actually like a fall type of food, but something about the color is just like so bright and nice. And so it's like very springy to me. So I'll kind of show you what this looks like already right now. Yeah, it's pretty. And then we're going to add our spices, and then we're going to let that simmer for about 20 minutes before we add in our last ingredient. So the spices, and again, we can use as little or as much. It's not supposed to be spicy. It does use some spicy spices, but very, very small amounts. So we're using less than a teaspoon really of all of these spicy spices. We're using like a quarter of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And if you want to add less, you can. I definitely recommend adding it because it really gives it a nice flavor. We're using also like a quarter teaspoon or half a teaspoon of chili powder. I actually like a little bit more chili powder, so I add closer to a teaspoon. I think it gives it like a nice, the cayenne pepper to me seems a little bit spicier, so I just prefer to use less of it. Already it smells so good in here. So mix that in. Then we're going to add a little bit of salt since the sauces I used were no salt added. So use about a teaspoon of salt. And then the last thing we're going to use, and this is a really, really small amount, is some dried oregano. So anytime we want to use dried spices, we want to rub it through our hands first. It really actually releases the taste. So we're going to use only an eighth of a teaspoon here. So not a lot. And then we're going to pour it in. When you rub it, it like releases some of those natural oils and you'll smell it. The smell will come right away. And so that's really what you're supposed to do whenever you're using some dried herbs. And then so that what we're going to do here is we're going to mix that all together. And then for 20 minutes, you're going to let that simmer. You're going to bring it all to a boil. That's what we're going to do first. Bring it to a boil. And then once it's on a boil, you're going to put it on simmer and you're going to let it sit for about 20 minutes. And then the last thing that we're going to do, and then keep it in for another 20 minutes, is put in our zucchini. And again, we want to cut our zucchini very, very, very small. So it's going to look like this. And then I'm going to just dish out some of the goulash that I have here. This is what it looks like in the final stages. It's been cooking for about 40 minutes. So there was the 20 minutes before and then the 20 minutes after, before the zucchini, and then the 20 minutes after.
Oh, wow.
It smells so good, so delicious.
Oh, yeah, it looks great.
And everything's cooked perfectly and it's really nice and light. And the chicken is really, really, oh, I forgot to add one ingredient, by the way, to the last one. And I'm going to go do that right now. So it traditionally uses beef stock, but I'm using a vegetarian chicken stock. You can use vegetable stock. You can use chicken, and by stock, I mean broth or stock. So any of those. I don't mix meat and milk together because I'm kosher, but you can. The recipe calls to sprinkle some cheddar cheese on top. It's so light. It's smells so good. You
Beautiful.
can eat this just like as kind of like by itself. You can put this over rice. You can put it over cauliflower rice if you want a more low carb option, over quinoa or brown rice. It smells so good. You know, again, like when I think of goulash, I think of heavy and whatever.
Yeah, that
But
looks
this is
light
really
and
a little bit
summery.
lighter and more summery. And I am someone who can eat soup or these types of food all year round. So
Mhm.
I don't have any rules.